Okay. Oops. Oh, there's Sarah. Sorry, I'm just trying to find Sarah. Sarah, would you like to say a few words to start our meeting off today?
Yeah, I just have a few things to say. I'm really excited that we're having this workshop. And if anything was more important than Romans, pretty serious. You have to really learn this stuff. I think I've probably had this, I don't know how many times. One day it's going to gel. Anyway, I'm looking forward to it. C-Scribes is going to have a workshop soon with Julie Wildman, and they're allowing Pacific Scribes people to enroll if you're interested. So you can check with the C-Scribes people. We have a bunch of C-Scribes people here today. So, and that's going to be in February. And Stanford has a handmade book exhibit that's free to the public until February 5th. It starts on the 25th of January and goes until February 5th. It's in the Peterson Gallery and the Munger Rotunda of the Green Library. I'm not sure, I know where one rotunda is, but I don't know if it's in the Green Library, but it's through the Bing collection of special collections. And then Friends of Calligraphy, I didn't know this, but they have, I mean, they know they have classes and things, and you can go on their website and see all this big list. But they also have something called resources, and you can go there and poke it, and they'll have little talks that have been given for the general membership, and you can see them, even if you're not a member. So I thought that was something interesting. I know Claire's been hard at work. If she's here, she can tell you about it, but she's been working on some workshops that are coming up. The one with C-Scribes is going to be an in-person workshop. That's kind of unusual for our area anyway. And we're really glad to see some new faces in this workshop.
Okay. All right. Is that you, Sarah? Okay. All right. So I would like to see whether Claire would like to say anything. Claire, would you like to say anything about classes?
Sure. I'm in the stages of planning with Kay Woolfolk to teach pointed pen Unschul in March. So, and that will be done on Zoom.
Okay. Perfect. All right. And that will go up on the website at some point soon?
Yeah, sometime soon.
Okay. All right.
Still
lovely.
working out the details.
Okay. All right. So we're going to start. I think everyone who's here is going to be here and everyone else is going to be watching it on video, I think, after this. So I would like to welcome everyone here today. And thank you for missing the first part of the 49ers game. We are going to win, but so it doesn't matter if you've missed the first part, it's all good. We have Heather Martinez here. We're very, well, I am very excited. I know the rest of you are. She's a for those of you who don't know her, she's a visual practitioner, and her website is letslettertogether.com. She has an award-winning book out, which is This Is It. And if you don't have it, it is a fun book to read through, and I'm sure she'll probably talk about it a little bit later. So I'm not going to tell you lots about Heather because I know she can tell you lots about herself when we spotlight her and let her start the meeting. So Heather, welcome, and can't wait for this class and to get my hands on a pen, on a felt tip pen.
Great. Thank you so much, Dawn, Sarah, and everybody at Pacific Scribes for having me today. And thank you for those of you that are visiting and giving up a part of your Sunday. So I'm going to jump right in because all of my slides talk about the intro and what I wanted to share with you. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you could keep yourself muted, we are recording this, so we'd love for you to be able to come back and watch it again, and perhaps keep a nice, clean recording for those who want to come back and watch it a little bit later. And so if you have any questions, if they're timely and relevant, please feel free to unmute, because sometimes it's faster to do that than to type. But if you have a question, you're not sure what to do with it, feel free to put 3 question marks in the chat. That helps me see that it's it's a question that you have. And if I miss it, then it'll help. Maybe Dawn, you can help moderate as well, because
Absolutely.
I can do a lot of things, but sometimes we're just more efficient if we have some help. So again, if you not sure if the question fits, you can also type it in the chat. So welcome everyone. Roman hand has many clothes, and I loved what Sarah said about how she is still learning Roman hand. And I personally think that Roman hand is like golf. We are always going to be trying to get better and better at it. If you play golf or swim or do something that is around form, because this is really truly an exercise in form. So if you don't have Roman hand yet, I'm going to give you some tips on how I got as good as I am now to it. And a little bit about me. My name is Heather Martinez. I'm going to throw out a bunch of words out here that may mean or not mean anything to you. So if you want to know what that means, let me know. I'm a visual practitioner, which means I do graphic recording and graphic facilitation, which means I do this really big in front of large groups where I draw and write large scale lettering. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. I'm also an appreciative inquiry facilitator. So when I facilitate meetings, I do it with the modality of appreciative inquiry. Some of you know me as a teacher or some type of a trainer. I'm also a visual coach, so I use visuals when I'm doing career and personal coaching. I'm also a tech host, so some of you have taken some training from me. I'm still training up people in especially calligraphy guilds on getting tech hosts so that they can help with these kinds of meetings. I'm a lettering artist living in Durango, Colorado, which is the southwest corner of Colorado, and I love hiking, street typing. Yes, that means taking my typewriter out on the streets and doing poetry and prose, and sharpening pencils. So if any of you like to geek out on pencil sharpening, I'm your gal. So any questions about me or any of these terms or roles that I play in life?
Actually, I do. I have one question for you right now, which is,
Yeah.
I think, what is your favorite pencil sharpener?
Haha. So I have one. So handheld, desktop, or no, I will tell you that I have a collection of pencil sharpeners. My favorite one, which is right here on my desk, is by Cum, K-U-M, and it's the double pencil sharpener. And it's also got a tip, like a point sharpener on each side as well. So it's a two-step. First, it takes away the wood, and then it starts with the pencil sharpening. It starts to sharpen the graphite. And then for the desktop, meaning the one that you grind like this, any double barrel grinding system is great. And my favorite is the Carl Angel 5. And that's a pretty simple school grade, $35. You can get it on Amazon. So yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
I love it. I love to geek out on pencils. And if any of you are familiar with black wing pencils, I'm also a black wing, not an ambassador, but they call me a maker. And so I know a lot about black wings. I can also answer questions about that too. I didn't put that on the list because I thought that might have been going a little too far. All right. So why markers? Many of you, most of you, if not all of you, are calligraphers with either formal or informal training. And so important. You're thinking, why would I ever want to use a marker? Well, I'll tell you why I use markers, because I work really big. Now, this is a probably, let's see, probably 2 meters high by 1 meter wide, maybe a little bit bigger. And there's 2 panels of chalkboard. And this is a chalkboard that was designed in Germany. It's only available in Europe. You can't get it in the United States because it's too hard to ship. I already tried. And I was in Copenhagen, and the owners of Neuland, the company that makes the markers that I use, they asked me to write on this wall. Now I said, what do you want me to write with? They just came out with their chalk markers, and they just came out with this chalkboard. And so you might notice my variation of Neuland hand, some metallic in here. I work really, really big, and I can only do that with a tool that isn't going to require me to dip into ink, but to have a constant flow of ink. So I'm using markers here, and I think I did this all with a marker that was about 12 millimeters wide on the broad edge, and then there was, because it's a square, on the next broad edge was probably about 5 or 6 millimeters. So you kind of get, I left me in there so you can get a sense of scale. And that's led me to a lot of interesting places. In the upper right or upper left there, I graphic record every year for a conference at Yale University for the International Society of Tree Foresters. And to the right there, you'll see that I'm graphic recording in front of thousands of people at a TEDx event in Washington, D.C. And again, I need a reliable source of ink to be able to deliver that. I've also traveled all over the world and given it's actually based on the street lettering tours in Amsterdam, Paris, London, Copenhagen, Melbourne, and San Francisco. So I go all over and I teach other visual practitioners how to use the professional tools that we have in their lettering practice so that they can capture really large scale as well. And I also make signs. So if any of you are interested in learning more about chalk markers or acrylic markers, and you want to learn how to do some sign painting like this, these are sidewalk chalkboards. I'll be teaching at Ghost Ranch through Literally Letters. It's a retreat that's sponsored by Escribiente, the New Mexico Calligraphy Guild. So excited about that if you want to join me this summer. And I've also studied with master calligraphers, sign painters, and graffiti artists from all over the world. For those of you that were at Seattle Letters, you may remember if you went to Mike Gold's talk, I graphic recorded his talk, Calligraphy is Flourishing, More Than You Might Guess. That graphic recording actually landed me a 2-page spread in Letter Arts Review. So I'm just sharing this with you because you might think, why would some girl with markers come to a calligraphy class? Well, this is just a little bit of my street cred. And I'm a huge fan of Carol Dubois. She's taught me well over a dozen different hands. I studied at Cheerio with Elmo von Slingerland, and you see me here with Jürgen, and also at Seattle Letters. If any of you know Elizabeth Walsh, she and I we led the Greenhorns meeting and dressed up as beekeepers and bees to keep everybody really busy. So you can see I work really big, and I need those markers to be able to do that. And I think it's important to really note that whatever calligraphy tool you are using, whether it's a pointed pen, a folded pen, if you're using a B-nib or any type of broad edge like a Pilot parallel pen or an automatic pen, those can all translate into Neuland markers. And so the 6 that you see at the top, those were some pens that Carol Dubois took a picture of and sent to me because she was going to use those in a class that we offered called Lettering with the Masters. And I said, okay, great. I have all the markers. I'm going to send you the markers. And she said, no, I'm not going to use the markers. Why don't you do the translation? So she showed us how to write with her pens, and then we translated it into the markers. So any lettering style that you have found, I would love for you to challenge me to be able to recreate that lettering style in a Neuland marker. And I'm pretty up for the challenge. And so what are the benefits of learning Roman majuscules? And many of you might already know it. That's great. Today, we're going to do a warm up and just a quick review, and I'll give you some, I'll talk about some of the resources that I have. It is a very slow practice. It's really about form, but it can also be a foundation for many other lettering styles. So if you can master Roman hand, it can influence other hands that you learn. One of my favorites is Chunky Caps by Amity Parks. But it's also going to give you the control and confidence in your calligraphy practice. And you might even find that you want to design some of your own, which can also be a lot of fun. So what do you want to have on hand today? Well, for sure you want a pencil, because we're going to start with our warm-ups with the pencil. If you have the 1-inch Roman hand practice sheet, that's great. If you don't, no worries. You can certainly go along with it, and then we'll make sure that you have that in a follow-up email as well. I think it was also in the handout. But you're going to want some broad edge tools. Now, any kind is going to work. You can use a Pilot parallel pen. You can use a calligraphy marker, and I'm going to go through some of these. I have a bunch of tools on my desk I'll share with you as well. But if you happen to have a chisel or wedge nib marker. That's what I'm going to be showing today. I'll show some of those today so that you can see it as well. I'll be working with markers, but you can do the translation for yourself using your calligraphy tools. I don't know that I would recommend like a broad edge speedball, just because sometimes it's hard to keep the entire piece flat when we're going around in rotations. But if that's all you've got, use it. Any kind of broad edge tool will really work, but the pilot parallel, even an automatic pen, you know, it's because it's straight, it's probably gonna be a little bit easier for you to make contact. And I would say somewhere between 2 and 6 millimeter is really going to be your best, which might be a little big for some of you. And honestly, that's really small for me. And then if you really, really want to go big, and you might have seen this in the handout, I have some Roman practice sheets at 4.5 inches high. Wow. And I'll show you that in a moment too. But I don't know if any of you have your flat brushes out and are ready to do that. But if you are, I'm here to support you. All right. So because I want to show you several different outfits for Roman hand, we're just going to focus on Iteo and Shridlu. Can anybody tell me what that is? Feel free to unmute. What is Iteo and Shridlu?
I, for one, absolutely have no idea. Couldn't even guess, Heather.
I love it. I love it. Does anybody know what Iteo and Shridlu is? I know there's
don't even know how to spell them.
So Iteo and Shridlu is the 12 most popular letters in the English language. So if you're speaking English and you're using the Roman alphabet, Iteo and Shridlu are the most popular letters. So if you don't have a whole lot of time to practice, but you want to practice, these are the 12 letters you want to practice. What's great about that is not only are they the most popular, but it's almost half of the alphabet. So if you can nail these, then most of your lettering is going to be great. And there are other letters in the alphabet that are shaped like these letters. So the attributes that are found in these letters are found in other letters. So if you only have a few minutes to practice every day, your go-to is Iteo and Shridlu. Now, this is something that Sheila Waters taught me, and I studied with Sheila Waters, and I'm going to tell you some stories about her because she's the one that taught me Roman hand. So we're going to start out again, like I said, using a pencil or any kind of monoline tool, whatever you've got. I'm going to use a marker so you can really see it, and we're going to do a Roman hand warm-up, and I'm going to talk you through Roman hand the way Sheila Waters taught me. And then using whatever broad edge pen or marker that you have on hand, we're going to learn, I'm going to teach you 3 other lettering styles, but I'm only going to focus on these 12 because we don't have a whole lot of time, and I know it's game day. I'm going to show you brick, clock face, and wacky Western. And those are all from my book. I'll talk about that too. So any lefties in the house, because I love lefties, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat or just unmute. It's pretty rare. We usually have maybe...
Heather, most calligraphers cringe at having lefties in their class, I think.
I love them. In fact, I have an entire online portal for them. So if you know a lefty, or if you're watching the video, if you go to bit.ly/lettering for lefties, I have a free class. So just wanted to put that out there. And then if any lefties show up today, then I'm prepared to answer any of your questions. I was a lefty until I learned cursive, and then I had to be a righty because there were only so many ergonomic pencils in the class. So we were budget restricted, but it wasn't traumatic. I just did it. And now, though I'm not purely ambidextrous, I can write with my left hand in a pinch. And sometimes I teach with my left hand if I need to. So great. Any questions before we get started? I'm going to jump into tools, talk about my book, and talk about, we'll jump right into Roman hand.
I do have one question, actually. So
Yeah.
how long did it take you to become more of a right-handed than the left? I asked this because my brother, I'm a twin, and I'm right-handed. Well, I can actually write left or right-handed, obviously better with my right than my left, but my brother is left-handed and cannot write with his right hand at all.
And how long did it take me?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Well, I have to admit, I was in the 3rd grade, so it was pretty impressionable. So it probably only took me a couple of weeks, but because I don't really remember, I just started doing it. I was just learning something new. If I had to learn now, I think it would take a lifetime of unlearning.
Right.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question though, but I think as adults, I think it depends on how determined you are. And if you have a good teacher, someone who's patient, that'll help you through it.
I wondered whether it was letter form that helped because I know when I tried to write left-handed to start with, I had to really think about letter forms. That was
That's
my
right.
biggest thing was as how do they join up and where do they join and where do I start?
Absolutely.
Versus I know what the letter looks like. It's just where do you start, right?
Exactly. So for lefties, they may have to come up with they're definitely going to have a different ductus than what we have, right? So righties are always pulling as they're writing and writing from left to right, and lefties are always pushing. So they have several things to contend with, whether it's angle of how they're holding their pen, so that they also don't smear. And I've got some tips around that. And then they also have to push, but in some cases they don't want to push. They're going to want to pull too. So the order and the direction in which they make their marks will be different. Yeah, great question. Any other questions? Okay, we're going to dive right in. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. So you're seeing my desk, it's full of tools here. So we're going to go through these. Actually, I'll clear this off a bit so it doesn't look so messy. And we'll just talk about a couple of the tools to begin. And so as calligraphers, I'd love to see in the chat, what are you using today? Are you using a Pilot parallel pen? And what size? Or are you using an automatic pen? And what size? Or are you using something like a Horizon pen? Or are you brave enough to use a flat folded pen? Or are you crazy enough to use a brush? Or did you go out and get maybe a calligrapher marker? So I'd love to see in the chat. Should be on your screen at the bottom of your screen if you click that chat button. 3.8 is a great one to work with. I was testing my parallel pens this morning, and the 3.8 is going to look great on our 1-inch practice sheet. A carpenter's pencil, that's fantastic. Great. Hopefully that's nice and flat when you're using it. Parallel pen, yep. 3.5 marker, perfect. Yeah. And I like to teach using markers or these types, especially Pilot parallel pens or markers, because again, it's that constant flow of ink. Good. A zig? Yep, that's right. I have a few zigs, but I got to tell you, because I use Neuland markers, I never tell people that I use Pigma or Zig or anything like that. And I don't use it. Actually, I just don't use them because I don't need them, because it's not a tool that I often use. But those are going to be great for what you're learning today. Good. 1/4-inch brush. Ooh, Lisa, you are brave. That's awesome. Yeah. And the 1/4-inch brush should work just fine with this 1-inch. So good for you for figuring out the what's going to be proportionate. Yep, 2 millimeter is going to be a little small, but it's still going to work. I'd say between 2 and 6, you're great. Yeah, good. I'm glad you have other things on hand. So if you are going to use any kind of a marker, the 1 millimeter is so small. Unless you're writing really, really tiny and you're used to that, you're really not going to see a lot of difference in the thicks and thins. But if the larger tool that you're using, I think you're going to be really satisfied with what you come out with. And you're also, because it's going to be bolder, but also you can always go small after you write big, and then it's much easier. If any of you know, if you've ever taken a photocopy of something on a Xerox machine, once you squish it down, it looks a lot better, doesn't it? So just wanted to, I don't know if any of you have ever seen a Horizon pen. These are brass. And I just wanted to point those out. And mine are, as you can see, it's been a long time since I used it because they're starting to patina, which is actually quite pretty. But this one's special. It's got a special magic wand to it. I just pull this back whenever I use it. This is one that Carol gave me. She said she'd never used one that big, so she allowed me to have it. I am going to grab a pencil just to have on hand, so that if anybody has any question about that, I'm also going to show how I do some pressure release. I love doing pressure release when I'm doing Roman hand. Now, the tools that I'm going to be using just for my monoline, this is called a fine one, and it's just a 1 millimeter marker, so that way you can see it. I'll probably be making some notes or corrections using this red colored one. And then I'll be using the wedge nib This is a wedge nib marker in the number 1 size is what we call it. And then Neuland also has a whole series of gray. And I like to teach in gray and practice in gray because then it allows you to see all of my different strokes, so where they overlap and that kind of thing. And they've got 5 different colors of gray, just so that there's different shades and tints. And the way that I open my, this is called a big one, is I hold it like this and I pop it with my thumb. And then it does have a wedge nib on it. And what's great about Neuland markers, this is just a little bit of a commercial, just also so you can see, is that they're never going to end up in the landfill. They are environmentally friendly, which means they are refillable. They have a little hole back here that's refillable. The nibs are replaceable. Oftentimes when we have some type of a marker, our nib runs out before we run out of ink, or it's not as sharp anymore. But what's great about the Neuland marker is that you don't have to worry about that. And I'm also going to show you how I fill them up. It's also ergonomic. So if you are using a tripod grip, meaning you've got your thumb and your index finger, and then the writing tool resting on your middle finger, if you have that kind of grip, or if you're using a grip like this, it's great for that. And this nib can turn in any direction. So you don't have to worry about sacrificing that ergonomic grip for indexing how you're pointing that marker. So I'm just going to pop this in here, and I'm squeezing the ink directly into the marker. And I knew that I was running out of ink today, so I think we're pretty safe to do that. Whenever I'm in a really big hurry, I might just drop a few drops on the edge here. So it might be a little dark when we go to use this here in a minute. So that's my big marker. Okay.
Heather, I have one question for you.
Yeah,
With the
yeah.
Neuland marker, so I have 3, 4 Neuland markers.
Uh-huh.
If I wanted to change my orange one without having to buy a new one, if I wanted
Yeah.
to change my orange one to a black one, can I do that by putting different color ink in it?
I
that
wouldn't
weird thing?
suggest it
Okay,
because what happens is you really can't go back. If you do want to change your orange to black and then never go back, it's not something you can clean out. So you would just go buy that black marker and that refillable ink and put it in there. But if you're like, I'm never going to use orange, then yeah, maybe go ahead and I would use Neuland ink. However, if
Right.
you want to try using some kind of other ink, you certainly can try it.
No, I don't think I'll ever use, I've used orange once, but I don't normally use orange.
Yeah.
But I just thought I have the pen and I want to use it.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily want to use orange. So I just wondered if I put black in it, whether it'll eventually seep through and I'll
Yeah.
get this weird color for a while, but then I'll eventually get black, I guess.
Yeah, and you might get black with orange undertone or, something like that. Probably. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, great question. Anyone else? Any other questions about these funny pens? They have no relationship to Neuland Hand, just so you know. The owner, his name is Guido Neuland, and he didn't even know what Neuland Hand was until I started teaching lettering to graphic recorders and visual practitioners. Then I gave him a bit of a little calligraphy lesson. So a couple things about my book. There are 3 versions of my book. So if you see some different covers out there, don't be alarmed. It's all the same insides, except one version is color, one version is black and white, and one version is in German. So my book, this is my version of the book. It is in black and white. I did that because I wanted it to be cost effective. But Neuland said, well, we want ours to be in color because they wanted to show off all the really great examples done by all of the other artists. I had a lot of my colleagues submit work to be in my book. So if you buy it from Neuland, it's going to look like this. And then they asked me to create the German version. And they said, okay, we want you to take all of those instructions that are in your ductus and write it in German. And I went, that'll take me years. There's no way I can do that. And if any of you know this, German words are very long, and I'm sure I'm going to misspell something. So what I did is I grabbed a Neuland marker and I wrote out the entire alphabet and I made a font out of it. And I gave them the font. That took me a weekend, and then my work was done. All they had to do is reset it in the German, in German. So just wanted to show you, in case you have any German friends or want to learn this in German, we have that version for you as well. And what we're going to be using today is we're going to start out with the number 1 inch, I should say, practice sheet. And if you're using a 2 to 3 millimeter tool, you can use the same practice sheet through this entire thing for all of the lettering styles, or you can just use plain paper. For I'm going to be demoing on this brick practice sheet for the bigger letters, because I'm going to be using this bigger marker. So don't worry about having to download these, but I will make them all available to you with links after the class as well. And then I did mention that 4.5 inch Roman practice sheet. The reason why I originally created this was because I was learning how to write Roman with a brush with, actually, it was this one, with a 3/4 inch brush. So if you want to make 4.5 inch letters, I was using a 3/4 inch brush to do that. So a little bit about how I learned Roman hand and how this particular template came about. It was my first lettering session with Sheila Waters. I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and she was in Pennsylvania. And so I would drive 2.5 hours to go learn from her, 2.5 hours one way, to go learn from her on every other Sunday when I was living there. And my very first class with her, she had me draw a square with a circle in it, diagonal lines and vertical lines where they intersected. And those were for the full and 3/4 size letters. And then she had me draw this one, which is essentially 2 of these stacked on top of one another. She had me do that for the first half of the day. I literally drew squares and circles for 3.5 hours. And then at lunchtime, she says, I think it's time for you to write letters. Oh, thank goodness. That's what I came there for. So then she taught me how to write the letters inside of it. Well, over the week, I lived a very busy life, and who had time to spend hours drawing all of these out? So I got onto my computer, went into Adobe Illustrator, and mathematically made sure these were all correct. And I laid out this entire sheet to fit on a letter size piece of paper. And I took it to her the next week, and she really scrutinized it. She measured it. She asked me, how do I know for sure they're perfect? And I showed her on my computer. It was all mathematically correct. And she took it and she photocopied it. And she said she was going to use it to teach her students. And I love that story. I was like, oh, that's great. So I'm going to show you how I learned Roman hand from Sheila Waters. So you are welcome. The very top part is where I'm going to start. So there's enough spaces there to write all of our letters if you want to do it with a monoline tool to begin. And then you've got space at the bottom to use for your broad edge tool. And I'd like to warm up with a monoline tool just to focus on form, and then go to the broad edge tool to focus on technique. So again, I will go through the entire alphabet with the monoline tool, but then I'm only going to do Iteo and Shridlu when we get to brick, clock face, and wacky Western. Okay, are we ready? Okay. So Sheila teaches these in families. And what I want you to notice is where that circle and square live in relationship to each other, along with the diagonals. And notice that these inside uprights is what I will call them, how they intersect where the circle and the diagonal come together. That's pretty important. I'm going to zoom in one more so that you can see. Let's see if I can go even. That's starting to get a little fuzzy. So we'll go here. Okay. So with the letter O, and you'll notice that I have all the letters written right here so that as a guide, so you know which ones belong in here. We start, if you were to look at this as a clock face, we start at the 1 o'clock position where the juncture of all of these lines come together, and just slowly go counterclockwise. Now this is going to be different if this is using a monoline tool. If you were to use a broad edge tool, you would hold your tool at an angle, and I believe it's 30 degrees, and you would start at the 11 and go to the 5. Do it this way. But I just want to show you, and I should probably just teach it that way too as we go. So let's do that. Let's try that again, but with the letter Q. We'll start at the 11 o'clock position, or where that juncture is, and go to the 5 o'clock position. where the next juncture is. And then we'll go the other way. So that way we're getting into the muscle memory. Oops, we're just following that circle best we can. So we can get into the muscle memory of creating these letters. And then the tail of the Q starts right at the bottom in the middle, because we're writing with all of these forms in hand, and goes out, but it doesn't go any further than this box because we don't want it to run into anything else. I've got a little oopsie there. And like Sarah said, this is a lifetime journey. Okay, so the letter C, it actually starts a little bit above that juncture and ends a little bit below the juncture, but it follows the entire circle. Now, if we're using a broad edge, again, we're going to start at that 11, come down and around, and then end, and it's just a little bit more flat. It doesn't follow the circle exactly at the very end, kind of breaks away. Same with the top. The G is very similar. When we get to this juncture here and we're going to stop, we're going to finish, we're going to have the G also continue this way. But now for the middle stem, we're starting right. If you think about going from the center here and over, sort of an invisible line, we're going straight down. Okay. Now, she didn't teach me a crossbar on that one, but if you did want a crossbar, it would go like that. Just makes it a little bit more readable. I wouldn't put what we call a beard on it, meaning I wouldn't have a stem that goes down. Now with the letter D, see, notice how the G and the C doesn't take up the entire square. It's about 7/8. Same with the letter D, but we're going to start on that inside upright, follow that line down, and then we're going to start at the top here, go across until we hit that circle, follow that circle down. Now we're with a monoline tool, so we can continue on. But if we were using a broad edge tool, we would stop at that point and then we would come back and go this way. Does anyone know why we stop at this point here if we had a broad edge tool? Put that right there.
Need to change the angle.
It might need to change the angle, but also we're going to run out of steam. We're going to get all the way here and then we're going to have to start pushing, and we don't want to push. So as righties, we'd want to pull this way. So we'd go as far as we can, get a nice thin angle, and then we would pull this way. But yeah, what you're going to notice is that right now with this size, if you're not used to using this, if you're not used to writing an inch big, you might be engaging more of your shoulders or your elbows to do this work, right? When we're writing really small, we're using just our fingers, maybe our wrists a little bit. But as you go larger, you'll notice you're going to use more muscle groups. All right, so now we get to go into some straight letters here. We call this hunt tabs. Don't mix that up with Iteo and Shridlu. We'll do that a little bit later. But with the H, we're going to start at that inside upright, go down, and it's really up to you if you do your crossbar first or your next upright. If you are going to do your crossbar first, it's absolutely in the middle, goes across, and ends at that next upright. Now, I'm the kind of person that actually draws the two stems first, and then I cross my H. But one of my other first teachers, Hermione Miller, she showed me to do the stem first, then across, because she says that really sets the width of your H. I'd love to hear if any of you have an opinion about that or a preference. Now with the U, again, starting at that inside upright, we come down until we hit that juncture where it starts to curve, and then we come back up and it stops. And then we bring this down. Now you have a choice here. You can either end it here or you can keep going. And I learned to keep going so it has that little bit of a stem. Okay. Now notice what's happening here is all these letters that we're going to write, we're going to be or start within those inside uprights. So the letter N, again, is going to be our first stem on the inside upright. Really important to notice here, we are not going to follow this diagonal. It's actually going to feel kind of strange. So don't be looking at the diagonal, except for maybe where they cross in the middle. I want you to, your trajectory is really right here at the bottom of the inside upright on the other side. So, and I'm even going to put a little mark there, and you might want to too. We are shooting for right above that, where I put that mark. Right there. And if you are looking there as you're writing, then you'll make it. But, you know, you don't look 2 inches above in front of your bumper when you're driving. So don't look right in front of your pin as you're drawing. So that's going to kind of looks a little off, but notice that it crossed right in the center. And then you're going to bring your other stem down. So by now you can kind of look back and start to notice how your letters live in relationship to this template, right? And I'm going to give you my secret on how I got really good at Roman hand in just 2 weeks. And that is at night, before I go to bed, before I go to sleep, I'm already in bed. And this is a hint that Carol Dubois gave me, is imagine this template in your mind. So if you can close your eyes and you can kind of see that, and then draw the letters in your mind's eye with that in mind. Now, if you can't do that, meaning you have aphantasia, people who cannot visualize something, then this won't work for you. You may have to use your finger in the air or something like that. But the idea is that if you can imagine this grid in your mind before you go to sleep and start writing those letters on that grid, you're really going to start seeing form, and you can start training your hand to reflect that form. And I did that every single night. You can't always start with A because you might fall asleep by the time you get halfway through. So you might have to start from Z and go the other way. But the idea was that after 2 weeks of visualizing that and practicing, I got really good at Neuland hand, or I'm sorry, Roman hand. Okay, so T. So I love, this is also a Carol Dubois. She doesn't care if you buy the, oops, my pen is running out of ink, got a little dry there. If you buy the land or build the building, it doesn't matter if you cross the T first or do the stem. The idea is that you're going from upright, that middle upright, to the middle upright, inside uprights, and then your stem goes right down the middle, or the best you can. Now with the letter A, you're going to start in the middle, and you're actually going to end just on the outside of that inside upright. So notice it's just like the tiniest bit of difference. But I'm shooting my eye there. And in fact, you might see I might have curved a little bit. And the crossbar is different than the H. It's actually lower. And it's lower because if we go too high, there's not a good balance in that counter space. If we go too high, it's going to fill up too much. So we want to be able to have a lower crossbar. I would say that it's about 1/3 between half and the bottom. It's about 1/3 of the way down between that. A V, just like the A, but without the crossbar. We're going to start just on the outside of that inside upright and shoot down to the center. Same with the other side. And just like the N, we're going to be contained within those inside uprights, but we're going to ignore that diagonal except for that middle part. We want to be able to cover that up. So again, I'm going to start here, go across. I'm going to use my trajectory to aim for there, come across. So I covered up my red dot, and it doesn't follow the diagonal exactly. All right. Now, Sheila talks about bevelers. And I don't even know how she pronounced this next part. I don't even think you can, but she called this Befflers. And I think she just said, you can remember what's remaining. I think that's what she said. So with the letter B, now here is where, again, we're using the inside uprights for all of our stems here. But what I want you to notice is that when I write the letter B, in order to get a smaller counter space at the top and a larger counter space at the bottom, I'm going to follow the inside till I get down here. It's going to be, well, it's going to be actually a little bit higher here. So I'm going to follow the inside of the top circle, and then using the same middle part, I'm going to follow the outside of the bottom circle. So very slightly, you might notice that the bottom is slightly bigger than the top. The E is quite simple. We're literally following the lines here. We're going to stay within those inside uprights. And each one of the horizontal cross strokes are going to end there. So your middle ends in the same place. It's not shorter. Okay. Something to notice with the F is that when you do the middle crossbar, you're going to do it slightly under the line, like just below. We're talking, it's such a small piece. Now you think, why? Does anyone know why we want the F a little bit lower? We
Was
don't
it when they were put close together that they might have looked like an E?
Exactly. That, and we don't have this bottom crossbar, and we want these two counter spaces to be more equal, visually equal. So it's just under the line. Now, when I say something like this to my visual practitioners, they just laugh and they're like, really? Do you think we're going to do that? We're writing so fast. And it's like, no, but at least you know the rule. You can break the rule if you need to. The L is so simple. It's literally just the bottom part of the E. Now, when we get to the P, I want you to remember what we did at the B, but I want you to know I want you to apply what we just learned about the F. And what I mean by that is you're going to follow the circle till you get to the outside here, and then you're going to follow the outside because you want that juncture here to be a little bit lower. So the B is going to end up being slightly higher, more in the middle. The P is going to be slightly lower for the same reason that we did so in the F, to create more of a balanced counter space. Notice too that the P comes out a little bit wider, right? We're following that rounded part. And we're doing that because rounded letters are optically smaller. Plus, we tend to engage our smaller muscles when we write circles. So we tend to write them smaller. So we have to consciously make it just a little bit bigger. And when we get to the R, we're definitely following the circle right on the line because we want that to be dead center. And in order to write the leg of our R, we're actually going to start at the top where the juncture is at the top of our R, draw an imaginary line through here, again, ignoring this diagonal that you see. And where we're going to end up is right on the outside of the box there. So this really comes into like trajectory, right? So we're starting here, drawing an invisible line. Our leg starts here, the leg of our R comes out and ends on the outside of the box. Any questions about the letter R? Of all the letters in the alphabet, the letter R is my favorite, and it's got it going on, right? It's got a stem, it's got a counter space, which is your lobe, and it's got a leg. Now the letter S, as Carol Dubois says, is a problem that was created for us to solve, but I'm going to show you how to solve it when it comes to Roman hand. So we're going to begin sort of like what we did with the C, slightly above where that curve starts. And the same goes for down here. We're going to apply what we learned in the letter B. So what I want you to imagine is sort of a snowman in here, meaning the top is going to be slightly smaller than the bottom. And so what that means is I'm starting on the inside upright, slightly above the circle, following the inside of the circle. I get to the center and I start following the outside of the circle. And then I'm going to end on the outside of the box because I want that to line up where the circle was. If you wanted to start the S sooner, you could, but you certainly want to make sure that it's not all the way to the side of the box because we want this curve to stick out ever so slightly because again, it's going to give us some balance. So if you're like, oh, that looks like it's a little too far back, you certainly can go back and correct it to come forward a little bit. Just don't go beyond that curve that you have outside here, the spine of that S. Now, if we were writing this with a broad edge, we would start at the 11 end over here. We would do that spine first, and then we would close it up. But we're just we're focusing on form right now. I think I switched back to that because I wanted to make sure that we were really focused on form. We'll work on technique next. Now we're going to do the K. Again, we're starting with that inside upright for our stem. Now, again, these diagonals might end up throwing you off. You certainly can, if you wanted to, you could have started out here and just followed it completely. You certainly can. I'm going to start just outside of the box, go to the center, and then end just outside of the box because that's the way she taught me. But you could move that whole thing over, and that's acceptable as well. With the X, we are focused on the outside of the box, right? So we're going to start on the outside of the box, end on the outside of the box. And I don't care if you start on the left side or the right side. It makes no difference as long as your form is good and your spacing is good when you go to write letters. Okay, so the outside of that box on every instance, just outside. And same with the top of the Y, but we're going to bring it right to the center. You start to notice this is actually quite logical when you start seeing how these letters live in relationship to the structure behind it. Is that something you can imagine? Now with the J, we have two different options. We can decide, do we want to break the box or do we want it all to live inside of the box? So I'm sure you can imagine if you wanted it to live inside of the box, you're going to start on that inside upright to the right, come down, and you could follow that circle around. But if I wanted to break the box, I would just come down like that. And I'm just coming around in a curve till it ends where that other upright is right here. And you've drawn this enough times, but the letter I is simply just a straight stroke. Okay. Any questions about Beffler's and then those other last 5 letters? Those are our, yeah. What's that?
Could you go over the S again?
Absolutely. I am going to write it down here. If anybody wants, you can got one down here to play with. And I'm going to start it here and end it here. So I'm starting a little bit higher than where that juncture is. I'm coming over on the inside of that circle till I get to the center part, right? I would usually do this all in one. I just wanted you to see that. And then I'm going to go on the outside of this circle. Even at the bottom is fine. And then over to the end of that box. It's okay if our rounded letters break the tops and the bottoms and this side of this box because visually rounded letters are smaller. So it's okay if they're just slightly bigger. True for baselines your rounded letters can break those baselines a little bit. All right. Now, when we go to put clothes on Roman, I want you to notice that I can get pretty wild. So we're going to start with brick. It's pretty strict. Then we're going to loosen up a little bit with clock face, and then we're going to get wacky with wacky Western. And I do want to show you the M and the W. And these letters are going to definitely break the box, especially the W. Now with the M, I'm just going to show you our trajectory. We're going to start on the inside upright. We're going to end on the outside of the box. We're going to end up drawing our the V in the middle, essentially, all the way down to the bottom. We're going to start with that inside upright, and we're going to end at the outside. So your stems are not straight. They actually splay out just a little bit in Roman hand, just the slightest bit. And what you're looking for is your V is going to be the exact same proportion as your V over here. And these two areas should be identical. So these should be the same size. And that's why we write it all the way to the bottom. This is one of the hardest things for me to break for people that take my handwriting class, not so much calligraphers because we're pretty good at following form, but with the handwriting class, people want to make their M's a lot higher. And I say, no, bring it all the way down. That way you can ensure that this is proportional. Now with our W is essentially two V's, but I didn't make a box big enough for that. So this last part, oh, you're not seeing the M on the screen. Interesting. Is anybody else having trouble? Maybe you might have another window blocking it. Yeah.
No, I can see it's fine.
Great. So imagine your V. And now you've gotten so good at it, you're going to do it again, but without the box. So what's a secret here? You are going to make your third stroke, the one you do here, parallel to your first stroke. And you're going to make your last stroke parallel to your second stroke. So that W is going to come out, oops, not so perfect, but that's okay. And this is your form. So how was that? How do people feel about that? I know that's probably the strictest thing I'm going to show you today.
Well, I thought I was doing quite well until I had to do the W and then realized I had to go out the box and then went, okay, maybe not so much.
Maybe not so much.
Yes. Great with the boxes, not so much without.
Yeah.
So
anyone else, how are you feeling about this? Love to know. Are we ready to put some clothes on? It feels kind of naked. So Roman hand is wonderful skeleton form. It's gonna allow us to do other things with it. And if we know this form, we can apply it to other lettering styles, and they can be fun or they can be serious. So I'm gonna start out with what I call brick. And brick was really inspired. So the three lettering styles that I'm going to show you were inspired by a trip that I took after I left Washington, D.C. I got in my 1947 teardrop trailer. She's affectionately named Flo because that was a very popular name in 1947. And I traveled across the country. And I started out in New York. Actually, I was near Albany in Troy. And I did a artist residency near there. And I was thinking about letters, and I thought, I need to make a lettering style that really has a big, bold slab serif. What would that look like? And so I decided that I wanted to be able to write with a really big marker. So I'm going to be writing with what's called the big one today. But Neuland also makes a 20 millimeter and a 30 millimeter marker as well. And based on what we just did in Roman, I'm going to go ahead and learn and create a new lettering style, but I've got to be really careful about how I use these thick lines. So if you want to grab just a regular piece of paper for now, go for it. And I'm just going to go through a couple of these warm-up strokes for those of you that are using a broad edge. So if you've got your Pilot Parallel pen or your marker or whatever is your broad edge, go ahead and grab that now. And we're just going to do some warm-up strokes. Now, my marker is different. If you're using like a zig or some other kind of marker, then chances are it's got a flat top, but mine doesn't. Mine's got an angle to it. So I have to keep that in mind. But the most important thing is whether it's angled or straight, I want you to think about the sides of your tool having little wheels on them. So if you're familiar with the lettering style Neuland hand, you're going to do great at this because it's forcing you to keep the entire broad edge flat on your paper. So we're going to start at what's called 0 degrees. Let me put this here so you can see it sort of in the middle. 0 degrees, and you're just going to draw a couple of straight lines down. A couple of tips when you do this. Exhale when you do a downstroke. Exhale when you do a downstroke, because if you at any time inhale, what will happen is somewhere you're going to get a jagged, right? Because your lungs will fill up, your arms might go out, and your shoulders will go up. So if you exhale, you'll get a nice straight, consistent line. Now, if you flip your tool so that the tool is vertical, so at 90 degrees, you can then do some shorter, because we don't have very long strokes that we're doing in this one, shorter horizontal strokes. And if you want to get really exact, you can draw 3 little lines, kind of follow those to give you a sense of how big we want to go here. And then, oops, that's not too perfect. But the idea is do 3 lines and go this way. And you're getting good at flipping your marker from horizontal to vertical. And just get comfortable doing that. Because the more comfortable you can get at flipping that, you can think less about it and think more about the form. Now we can do a couple of other warm-up strokes, keeping your marker at that 0 degree. Let's go ahead and make a few diagonals. And then pulling the other direction. That's going to be helpful in our N and our Z or Z. And then because we're using this broad edge, in some cases, we're going to need to finish a letter. So we'll just do this right now. If I were creating the letter S, I may do the spine first, like this. We're kind of not using any kind of a guide right now, but I just want you to imagine your spine. And then at about a 45-degree angle, I'm drawing over that spine, shifting almost like I'm coming over, and then on the left side, I'm kind of pivoting and then coming down, right? So if I were to draw a zebra, this is called a zebra ductus. So you can kind of see what my tool is doing. Notice I still have coverage over here. I'm not lifting this up. I'm not lifting to the right because you might lose some ink there, but I'm just pivoting like I'm pivoting on one foot. And to finish the S, starting up here, pivoting and coming over. And then if you ever notice you have a little area that needs filling up, you can just use the side of your tool to do that. Now, if you're using a dip pen, that's a little harder. But again, this finish is going to look sort of like that. It starts straight, pivots, and then ends at an angle. So I will write what direction these are going in. And that's just going to take a little bit of finesse. Once we see it in relationship to the letter, it's going to make some sense. If you remember that D that we did, where I talked about you're going to come around, well, if you're going to tidy something up, it might look like that. So again, starting vertically and then angling the marker ever so slightly. We're also going to have to make a lobe of a B, a P, or an R. So we're going to start at that 90-degree, come out, and we're going to end up coming around, and you're going to only go as far as you can, right? Because we're not, oh, we're going to start to, if you can see my screen, it's like, oh, I'm coming off the screen because I'm moving my whole body because my elbow has hit the side of my body. Well, we're going to stop there, because if not, we could end up having bad form, right? It's sort of like driving outside of your lane in a car. You start to get a little wild there. So notice what's happening is I'm going to come here and I'm going to stop. And then when I go to, and we'll cover this when we do the R, we'll have an opportunity to come back and finish it up. That was that little tidy stroke I did there, where you're just kind of tidying it up. Okay, but we'll cover that when we get to that particular letter. All right. So let's go ahead and do some Itaewon Shridlu in brick. And so if you're working on that same practice sheet, or if you don't have it, that's fine. You can just follow along. But if you're working on the same practice sheet, you'll notice this is bigger because I'm using a bigger marker. So when I'll switch between a square and one of these 1/2 inches between letters. So you'll see me doing a lot of paper switching, and it's not to confuse you. It's really so that you can see that I'm switching between these. And I guess had I thought about it, I could have created just an Itaewon Shridlu practice sheet, so we wouldn't have to do that. But chances are you're only going to need 2 of these. Let me just get rid of one of these now. Yeah, so I'll do it this way. Okay. So Itaewon Shridlu, starting with an E, we're going to use the smaller one. And when you're using a broad edge, what I want you to consider is, yes, you've got this entire thing here. Let me just go in. But I want you to imagine that there's a line or a dot right in the middle, because you're going to line that up. This one's kind of hard to see. You're going to line that up with a lot of these vertical lines that you have here. Okay, so what do I mean by that? If I go to write my E, I'm going to imagine there being a dot or a line in the middle of there, and I'm going to put it right on that inside upright best I can. Draw the line down, stop. And because brick has what's called a slab serif, we're going to break this first stem. So I'm going to go a little bit over, come across to this second upright. Now, I really want this to be right on that box, but I'm using a marker and I can't see because it's so big, and it's okay if this grows a little bit. We're going to do the same thing with the bottom. We're going to start before the stem and end on that inside upright. Now, if you go a little bit further or you don't get quite there, it's okay, because we're going to cover it up, because we're going to flip our marker again. So the idea is we're constantly working on that broad edge of that marker. I'm going to come over and come sit down just slightly, not a lot, because now going vertical again, coming across in the center, and stop. Now, you can kind of see where Roman hand lives in there. The difference here is that we have serifs, right? Serif, or serif in French, means foot. We want to leave a little bit of space here, and notice that my crossbar ends on that inside upright, but that the serif goes all the way out to the box. That's okay. What we don't want to do is put another serif in there. There's just not enough room. That's like too much. That would be like going to a rock concert with very crowded. All right, then we're going to go to T. And we're going to start, again, you can start with the center coming down, or you can go across, either way. But we're going to start and end on those inside uprights. And again, if you're working larger than normal, you might feel your body engage more. So more of your shoulder and elbow. Now we're going to go vertically down, right down the center. And to add our serifs, just like we did with the E, we're going to come down here just a little bit on each side. And if you're using, that's what why these guidelines are so great, because you can get pretty close. And then at the bottom, we're just gonna, just like we did with the first part of the E, we're just gonna make small serifs on each side of that. Now, what you're seeing are all my mistakes, right? So you're seeing everything in there. If I were to use a darker marker, well, even this is still gray, it's not going to be as noticeable. So if some of you are using black, and I drew that a little bit out of order, if you're using black, you're not going to see, now I see all kinds of mistakes because I went kind of sideways. Well, that's not a good one. But if you're using black, you're not going to see any of those crossovers. So you can look at mine. Hopefully I'm going to be pretty close. Now with the A, it's very similar to Roman hand in that we're going to start at that top at 0 degrees, and we're going to end with that little imaginary line right on that upright, that inside upright. So again, my trajectory, the best I can do it, is going to end up there. We're going to do that again to the other side. It's essentially an upside down V. And then now going vertical or 90 degrees, I'm just going to do, and I think this might be a little bit different in the book, I'm just going to put a serif on the left. I think it looks a little bit more elegant. I don't like to put serifs on every single terminal. You'll see this in the N because that looks a little adolescent. But we are going to do the bottom serifs of the A, and you want to do them first before the crossbar, because otherwise you might run out of room and you don't want to fill that up. So this crossbar is a little bit higher than Roman hand, but just enough to clear the bottom serifs. Okay. Now the O. Oh boy. So this is, if you've been warming up today, you're probably going to be fine. Couple of tips about the O. First of all, we're going to start at around the 11 o'clock. I'm going to kind of overshoot it a little bit, and then I'm going to overshoot as much as I can by the time I get, well, this arrow really is going the wrong way. We're going to go this way. I'm going to overshoot it, maybe start over here, go as far as I can, and then come back and go this other way. So if you're used to doing italic or foundational, this is going to feel kind of weird. But if you're used to doing Neuland hand, this is going to feel pretty normal. You're going to keep that flat. And what I'm doing here, because I'm a righty, is I'm watching the outside of my tool to make sure that it is fitting and going around the circle. And now when I come back over here, I'm going to have a little bit of area to cross over, which is great. But because of where I'm sitting, I can't see the outside of this circle. So the secret here is that when I begin, I am looking at not any lines, but I am looking at the counter space and trying to do my best to draw the inside of that circle. Now that's not perfect. So the O is going to take some practice, but the idea is that you're looking at the inside, the counter space, to make that shape when you can't see where your marker is going, okay? And then this will be our last letter on this one till we're going to move over to Shridlu to do our S, the smaller shape. So have that one ready. Okay, so now we're going to do the N, and we're going to start at that 0 degree on that inside upright to make our stem. We're going to shoot 4, just like we did the A, to meet that other one down here, but we're still going to start at 0 degree. Ooh, I didn't quite make it, but that's all right. And then come down. Now, where you put the serifs on the N really shows that you know what you're doing. And so notice that my serifs are at the top left is only going to go on the left, like we did with the A. On the bottom left, it's going to go on both sides. In the upper right, it's going to go on both sides. But on the lower right, there is no serif. Okay, so really important that when you draw this serif on the left, that it meets the same baseline as where you ended this on the right. So notice I have a lot of overlap here. And how you draw that first stem is going to be key. So this really makes a difference. Okay. I'm going to switch to that. We're going to work on this size here for the S. Remember again the whole, and you might take a pencil and say, okay, we're going to go small on the top, bigger on the bottom, start here, end here. But we're also going to put some serifs in here, right? So to the best of my ability, I'm going to overshoot that 11 o'clock, come down here, be on the inside as much as I can, switch to the outside, and I'm going to go as far as I can before I start losing my form. So the spine of my S, I'm trying to get as much in there as I can, because when I go to finish it, I'm going to come over. It's got to have a serif, so it's going to come over and then come down. And you want to come over far enough that it doesn't bump into the spine when you make your small serif. Same with this side. This is sort of, this was that first, one of those first practice strokes. And so on the bottom here, I kind of need to round that out with the corner of my marker. So that's the S. And I'll do that again.
Sarah, Heather, I have to say, you're making this look very easy.
Yeah,
The
well,
way
I'm not doing it
manipulate your
perfect either.
hand, and the way I manipulate my hand is obviously not the same way, because the way you do those is obviously, you can see you've had years of practice.
Yeah, and keep in mind that I've also had years of not great practice because I'm a visual practitioner, which means I'm not creating this beautiful lettering style to be perfect. When I write something like this, when I'm doing my job, I mean, I'm going super slow now so that you can watch me. But when I go to do something like this, I slow down for the letter S, and you can see it's not perfect. And it doesn't have to be perfect because it's hand drawn for what I'm doing, but I have to write something like this within maybe 2 seconds. So I've got to go super fast. This next letter is going to seem easy because it's the letter H, and it's a lot like the letter N, except for we do get to put serifs on all of our terminals. So we've got, again, I would, because this is the way I do it, I do my uprights first, and then I go across. You can wait to do the center part if you want after you do your serifs, because remember, your serifs might bump into it. So depending on how accurate you are inside of this box might determine if you have to go up or down for your crossbar. And I was pretty good, so I get to go across the middle there. So the H is actually quite wide. Now, surprisingly, we're going to go back to that smaller one for the R. Again, starting at that inside upright for our stem. Now, here's where things get interesting because we're going to start before the stem, just like we did with the E, but we're also going to add a curve, and we're going to go as far as we can, but we don't want to go so far that we mess up our form. I'm following, oops, I went a little too small here. So I get about there, and that's okay. I'm going to start at 0, and I can do that little cleanup move if I need to. I'm not too concerned about me lifting here because I'm going to get ready to do my leg. And again, I'm going to start in that upper left-hand corner and make an imaginary leg that's going to come out to the side of my box. Now you're like, but wait, where does the serif go? So again, we're going to write our little serif on our stem, but for the R, it only comes out to the right. So there's no serif on the inside because that would get way too busy. They'd probably bump into each other. So notice I started my serif at the bottom angle of that R. The S and the R have a lot going on. Now the D, we're going to do something similar, but we're going to the full square. So we've got our stem. We're going to break our stem with our slab serif. We're going to follow that circle all the way around. You can say that we're following the inside here because the D is so very wide. Go as far as you can and stop, because if it starts to get jaggedy or going in a different direction, you've gone too far. And then I'm going to come back and do that little cleanup move. And again, if you're using black, this looks pretty good. Now, the L, it's popular, but I have to tell you, it's so much like the E that you're going to just say, well, why did we even practice this? Because you need to practice making that little serif before your stem and practice making the little serifs on the terminal. Now the U.
Heather, one thing quickly.
yeah.
Am I seeing that you're keeping your paper very straight on the table? Would that be?
Yeah. So I am keeping the paper as straight as I can on the table. If I shift a little bit, it's because I think my camera and my table, yeah, there we go. That's a little bit straighter. I work this way because when I put a big piece of paper up on the wall, I don't have the luxury of getting to turn it. Right? We're all sitting and practicing at a table. So if it's more comfortable for you to turn your paper, then go ahead. You have total permission. You don't need me. I will tell you that I have asked other teachers how they practice, and I know that Carol Dubois practices with her paper straight ahead of her. She does not tilt her paper when she creates letters, and she has no problem telling you that. She'll say, nope, she keeps it as straight as possible, but you can do whatever you want. She also says you are the designer with the tool in your hand. And if you're not ergonomically comfortable or your letters aren't coming out right because you're trying to keep your paper straight, then turn it. That's totally okay.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. Especially I love permission questions because sometimes we just need permission or to know that someone else does something a similar way. But I'm keeping it straight. I've also noticed that when I first started learning online and then teaching online, started learning online about 7 years ago. There weren't that many people teaching online then. But then when I started teaching online, I realized that when it's slanted like that, I have to do a lot of calculating to make it work, right? To make it work for me. So this is the slowest lettering style we're going to do. Clock face is going to go much faster, and then wacky Western is going to blow your mind. So with the U, we're going to come down. When we hit that curved juncture, go ahead and follow it. It's okay if you're a little bit outside of the line, go as far as you can and stop. Again, just like anytime we're pulling, if you feel like you've reached your limit, then stop, because we can always come back. And I'm going to follow this curve again and just go over it. So in this case, I'm not making that little stem because when I put these serifs on the top, I think it would look a little silly. And it's like, well, where would you put the serif at the bottom? So you just did Iteo and Shridlu, almost half the letters of the alphabet, 12 of the most popular letters in the alphabet. So when would you use a lettering style like this? Does anybody have any ideas? When would you use those?
For a title of something, maybe.
Yes. So something big, a poster.
Maybe take the first letter and make it the capital of something. Or does that look weird when you put it with something else? If you use the first letter with that and then use something else as a, or would you write the first letter large and the next one smaller?
You certainly could. And it's also fun to decorate too, right? So after you're done with your letter, you can always go over it, outline it with a black line, remembering that if you have any mistakes, that black line really defines it. So
Mine will be having a lot of black lines.
yeah, and you already have a lot. If you're already using black, like this could be another color inside of here, red, yellow, or something like that. If you're already using black, then maybe you wouldn't do this, but or maybe you would even go in if you knew what your light source was, you could even put in a bit of a drop shadow
I meant mine would have a lot of black because there's a lot of little mistakes to.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't follow them all. You wouldn't follow all of those mistakes. You would go over them and say, okay, I'm going to cover that up, right? Sort of like makeup. Yeah. Good. So this is for those who like really tight lines. Now, obviously, maybe it's not too obvious, but I'm not a really good tight kind of person. I like to be kind of loose when I make my letters. I mean, really loose. I get pretty loose. So let's see. Did we get them all? Did I miss any? I might have missed the I, actually. Teowen. Yeah, I missed the I. So I'll cover the I real quick, just so that you have it. I think you could figure it out on your own, and that you're going to go straight down. And then when you do make the serifs, if you're, oops, that's not a great one. Let me start over since I have an extra box. I'm going to go straight down. Hopefully you're in the middle. And then when you go to make these serifs, they're going to be on the inside of those uprights. So that's really the width of your serif. Okay. So these are pretty straight. For those of you that like brush lettering and more expressive lettering, we're going to get a little closer with clock face, and then we're going to have a whole lot of fun when we get to Wacky Western, because we're not even going to use any of these guidelines. We're just going to go for it. So Iteo and Shridlu with clock face. So let me show you a little bit about clock face. So between brick and clock face, I went from the East Coast to the West Coast. And when I got to the West Coast, I went to the Conger, let me get out here, the Conger Street Clock Museum. Now, I went to this, it's in Eugene, Oregon. I planned to go here at noon because I wanted to hear all of the clocks ring at noon. And I got there and all of the clocks were set at different times. And I told them, you must be mad, because the clocks were just going off all willy-nilly and it made me nuts. I was like, oh my gosh. But what I learned from being here is that the face of a clock uses those Roman numerals, right? So we have these nice thick stems, and then we have these really thin crossbars or serifs. And so that's what inspired clock face. And I actually came up with this lettering style before I took Amity Park's chunky caps, but I'll tell you, my clock face got better as I practiced because of her class. So again, you're going to use the broad edge of your tool, and you're going to remember this, this saying, and you probably remember this if you know brush lettering, and that is thick down and thin up, or in our case, thin across. It's just a really good thing to keep in mind. And so again, we are going to be using those squares. And a good way to know the proportion for this lettering style, it's actually 4 nib widths high. So I didn't say this with brick, but brick is 5 nib widths high. And the reason being, if we look at the letter E, if we're doing something like brick, we need to have extra space in there to do that crossbar, because we have these chunky serifs and we have this really chunky crossbar. But when we get to clock face, we don't have all that going on. So the letter E is oftentimes the indicator of how high a lettering style needs to be because of the proportion of the letter and the tool that you're using. So if you don't happen to have any more practice paper, that's fine. Just think of it as 4 nib widths high, and we're still following as much as we can our Roman hand. Okay. So I'll be using this bigger template, and we're going to start with the letter E. Now, I like to stylize mine just a tad, which means you can start at 0 degree, but I like to start at just a little bit of an angle, just because I feel like it, I don't have to be perfect. And if I make a mistake, that little angle kind of helps me a little bit. So if you're used to like a 30-degree angle or a 20-degree angle in your calligraphy, this is great. And then I'm using the very tip of my broad edge. So if you're using a parallel pen or if you're using a marker, you're just going to use the side to make that crossbar. It's only going to go to that inside upright, and then you can make just the smallest little serif if you want. And you can either go straight or you can give your crossbars a little bit of a wave. And I put a little bit of a wave in mine because again, I'm writing quickly. I'm writing with essentially a sponge at the end of a stick. So I'm going to go very fast. And so I'm okay with there being a little bit of a wave. It kind of gives me a rhythm. I don't have to worry about things being perfect. You can make some mistakes there. So the same with the letter T. In this case, I would probably do the stem first so I can see that nice beginning and end at an angle. And then my crossbar at the top is going to go those inside uprights. And I'm not too worried about this little angle sticking out, or if I drew it above that, I'm okay if there's a little triangle of white there. It's fine. And there's no serif at the bottom here. I mean, you can put one if you want, but I think that'll work. I think if you put a serif down here, it might accidentally get mistaken by an I. So I just leave it. Now, with the that whole thick down, thin up, let's also think of it this way. We never want two thicks to come together in clock face. So if I'm still following how I make an A, I'm actually going to use the tip of the nib for the left side, and I'm going to use the broad edge of my marker for the right side. And that's just the correct way, or the way that we write our A's in calligraphy. And I'm actually going to redo that because this is not a great angle. If you want to do the right angle first, you can, and then that will inform you where you want to start the one on the left. Now, typically, if your A is the first letter, again, your crossbar is going to be low. You can break that first stem. So notice I drew mine a little bit with a wave. It's lower, and I broke that left stem. When we go to write the O, here's where we can have some fun. Now, we're at the angle now, and I would just do it at a 45-degree angle. But it's really, again, it's not that critical. Starting at 11 o'clock position, and I'm ending at the 5 o'clock position, and I'm stopping. I'm going to pick up my pen, my marker, and now I'm going to follow with the tip, that thin side, all the way around. This circle is going to come all the way around. So you've got this nice thick and thin happening now. Now the letter N, the thick part, if we want to be more calligraphy-like, is going to go in the center. So I personally would draw that first at a 45-degree angle is what our pen is going to be at. I would draw that first because it's really hard to get these junctures to line up, and I'm okay with the stem being a little bit on the inside of each of these. I would rather this stick out a little bit than this not match up and then have to like come to it. So this one I'd probably be more like this. This might be a little bit too big. Or you can have it match up exactly if you want. It's totally up to you. Now the S we're going to make is going to be so much simpler. We're still going to make that spine first, starting at sort of the 11 o'clock position up here and ending around the 5 o'clock position here. We're going to hold it at a 45-degree angle. We're going to follow that inside circle till we get to the middle and then go to the outside. And I think this is the most elegant thing. Now we're going to use the tip of our writing instrument to come over to finish it in both directions. And the key here is we want this to line up here, and this can line up here or it can be a little bit on the short end. Depends on how far you brought it over. But the key is you don't want it to look like it's leaning back, but you also don't want it to look like it's leaning forward. And if we follow the inside of the circle here and the outside of the circle there, it's going to give us a nicer proportion, especially from the top and my bottom. All right. What's the next letter? The H. So the H is that is the wider square. Let's see if I can find. Here we go. Now the H, I just do the left side, the left upright. Again, remember that little rule that we had about the line being right in the middle, but I'm doing it at about just a little bit of an angle. The left side's going to be thick, but then I'm going to make the right side using the edge of my marker. How's that working out for the Pilot parallel pen or the marker people? Is it, if it seems too thin, you might just have to make your letter smaller.
Mine, yeah, I'm using the zig and it seems quite thin compared to the thick.
Yeah. And if that's the case, then you might just want to make sure that your angle is more at a 45-degree angle and that you're writing the whole thing instead of an inch. Maybe go ahead and make yourself a pen stroke to the side and make it actually 4 nib widths high. And again, with that H, that crossbar is going to be right in the center. But if it's your first letter of the alphabet or the first letter in the word, you can break the left side. If it's the last letter of your word, you can break the right side with your stem. So something like that. Our D, again, the stem is the same. And now you can decide if you want to break the top or start here, but this is where I would probably add just the slightest bit using the edge to make the thin line. I'm following the circle all the way around because it's a mono line. I don't have to stop. And I would just add a little serif on each side. I just think that looks nice. Remember, we're doing Iteo and Shridlu, so we're going to pop over and do the R. So if you imagine our stems are really the thick part because they're the basis of our letters. That R, again, we can start a little bit past the stem, bring it around, right in the middle. And remember how we make the leg of our R. We're going to imagine we're starting up here in the left. We're going to make an imaginary line so that we have a little bit of a space before our leg starts. It's going to be thin as well. It can come straight down, or you can give it a little bit of a kick out. This is where it can go straight, or you could even add a little bit of a hump if you want. So again, you're the designer with the tool in your hand. SH shrid. Oh, we did those out of order, but that's okay. We're going to do the L and then the U. And the L, it's just that. You could add a little serif at the top, but again, I'd leave it out so it doesn't get confused with the I, especially if it's just a very simple lettering style. And then the U. And this lettering style is so much faster than brick, isn't it? Because we don't have to keep rotating and keeping everything flat. The U, you're going to come down and follow till about the 5 position. You want that to taper off because that you're going to use the tip of your nib to connect to it. Okay, so the left side is going to be thick and the right side is going to be thin. So I'm just curious. We've got those who know Neuland hand, those who know more italic calligraphy. I'm curious, what did you feel more comfortable doing, brick or clock face? Go ahead and unmute if you want or type in the chat.
Brick.
Brick. Ah, you're a straight line person. Okay. Fix, right? Yeah. Who else? Brick or clock face?
Also brick. Brick.
Okay.
I thought I like some letters in some and some letters in others.
That's
I think
right.
it's how much I can bend my hand around.
That's right.
my problem. The ones I have to bend my hand around and rotate the pen at the same time as I'm having trouble with those. So I think those ones are difficult, but the other ones are fine.
Yeah. And if you're finding that you're having a hard time bending your hand around, ask yourself, is it your fingers or do you need to engage more of your shoulder and your elbow to get there?
Yeah, I think that's my problem. I think I've done that and run out of space, and then I tried to manipulate my pen, and then you can see the little mark where I manipulated my pen after I'd already stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So you kind of have to know your limits, right?
Yeah.
And which muscles to engage. And I'm right with Mary Ann that it's, for me, it's about clock face. Brick was, I wanted it to be at the beginning because I wanted my visual practitioners to really get form, because they have a lot of, because they basically work with their handwriting and they don't have any formal training. That was as much training as they were going to get. But it was also, even though it's the first chapter, it's the last chapter I wrote because I feel the most uncomfortable with brick. But I know that people love it. So if you ever decide that you want to do this and actually put it into play, remember it's 5 nibwits high, because it's so easy to start writing and then we get to the E and then we're like, oh no, we have to make the E bigger than all the other letters. So make sure you get that nib scale, because that's going to be your secret. All right, so Wacky Western's going to go fast. You can use lined paper, you can use regular paper, doesn't matter. I'm going to use what's called the Hand Learning Lettering Pad by Neuland, just because I have it here. And let me show you what that looks like. So just a super quick commercial, and you're seeing my messy desk. This hand lettering learning pad, it's called To Go because it's actually in a pad. I also make Neuland also makes a flip chart size. And what that is a really huge, like if you can imagine being in a meeting, a big flip chart size. And I designed those, I designed all of the lines, and they're very faint here, but I designed all these lines to go with certain markers and certain letters. And so I'm just using that today. But Wacky Western, have any of you ever been to Wall Drug in South Dakota? Who's been to Wall, South Dakota?
Nope, never been there.
If you've
Yes.
ever driven, I see somebody laughing. If you've ever driven between the East Coast and the West Coast and you took, I think it's, I don't know if it's, I can't remember what highway it is, probably in my book. Here we go, Highway 90. For nearly 300 miles, you will see billboards, and they are the craziest billboards. I saw a head nod there. They are nuts. When I got there, there were 2 prominent lettering styles. One was like sign painter, very casual sign painter, which I teach a whole different class. It's not even based on Roman, really. Yep. So Kathy's been there. Then there was this Western, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go wacky with this. So a couple of attributes. I love to teach lettering styles by attributes. The first attribute is that Wacky Western is 8 nibwits high. Now, I on purpose put this little yucky piece in here to remind my students that they don't have to be perfect, but we're really going for 8 nibwits high. And it can be very formal, so you can make it very straight, like brick. So you can make it really, really straight, or you can make it really casual. And this one was actually written with a brush nib. So I personally love to write this lettering style with a brush nib, but what it looks like is pretty wacky, and I'll show you. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take your tool and make your 8 nibwits. And I'm going to start on the top because I'm going to try to fill up this entire page. And then I'm going to start from my baseline down here, just because I've done this before. But you're going to probably want to start, if you have any kind of lined paper, you're going to want to start from your baseline and go up. That's just a good practice. I just know my lettering, or this piece of paper. We're going to do Iteo and Shridlu again. And what's fun about this is, again, you can make it really super straight, but because I like to make mine wacky, if any of you have taken versals, I'm making like just the slightest bend in my letter. So if you like to do it straight, you can just do 2 perfectly straight with just the slightest overlap in between. So this is the stem of my E. Then I'm going to come out and I'm going to have a little bit, again, I'm going to make it just a little bit of a bend for my crossbar. Notice I'm not going to go too much higher than my nib width here. And I want to make sure at the bottom, I don't go too much lower either, because this lettering style will grow in height if you're not careful. Now I am going to put in my serifs, and they're going to be a double serif. Notice that they're double. So it's going to start out not too far. I don't want to get all the way to the end and then do it. So be thinking about your Roman. And then I'm going to have my crossbar in the middle. And again, just like in brick, I don't have it come all the way out. Now, remember, this is wacky and it's Western. So I add a little thing here on the end. This is like, think of it as like the end of a frayed rope or something, just like I've done here with my serifs. Again, these don't have to be perfectly lined up. These are wacky. So that's the E. Now, at the very end, I'm going to show you where to put the spurs because it's Western, but you can also write them without the spurs. So for the T, again, I'm going to draw my stem. You can do your crossbar first if you want. Totally up to you. And then my serifs. Again, they're wacky. Now, again, at the bottom, I don't want to go too far down, so I'm going to cover up part of that base. So the bottom one can be a little bit wider than the top one because you don't want this to get too wide. So there's our T. And again, you're seeing this with all the glory, right? You're seeing all the overstrokes. The A, the left side is going to be a single stroke. The right side is going to be a double stroke. And to do that with a bit of a curve is kind of a fun adventure. Remember, I'm kind of taking from versals here, if any of you have taken versals. And then when I add my serifs, I'll add the first one at the top. It's a double. And it's only on the left. And then keeping in mind the height, it's okay if it goes a little higher at the top, but at the bottom, keeping in mind the height, want to keep that double stroke pretty even along the bottom, not growing too much. And then the crossbar, you want to do these first so that it doesn't bump into your crossbar. Then you'll put in your crossbar. Okay, now the O. This is where you got to take a deep breath. You're going to definitely engage more of your elbows and shoulders for this, especially if you're working really big. So if you need to, go ahead and draw a circle on your paper. If you need to, it's fine. It's not cheating. You're going to cover it up with ink anyway. And this is going to be a double stroke on each side, but the top can be a little bit thinner if you want. It's just a practice of it just depends on how you want to do it. Now, I would do the entire O. And then I would say, ooh, if it's too wide, I would write on the inside. And if it's too narrow, I would then correct it by writing on the outside. Now, if you're writing from left to right, which you will, you're going to have to consider the spacing on the left side also, as well as if you don't make it the right shape. So notice I'm going to do thick. And it's going to be a little bit thinner on the top. And then thick again. You can always go back and kind of correct it if you need to. So there's your O. Now the N, if you're using big paper like I am, you're going to be writing a lot of nib strokes. Now your N, your first stroke, again, if you like to be really straight, go for it. I'm going to actually start straight here. And I'm going to put my crossbar, which is going to be your thick stroke. It's going to have a bit of some curves in it. And then I'm going to bring this down and I'm going to I'm hoping that this is going to be kind of straightened up a bit because remember, we don't have any serif on that corner. So I should have brought this over just a tiny bit to cover that up, but that's okay. Remember our serifs on the N, on the upper left are going to go on the left. On the bottom, here's where you got to be really careful. You don't want it to end up way down here. So I am just going to build it bottom up. Upper right, you have it on both sides. On the lower right, you have nothing. Okay, the letter S. Again, anytime I add some curves, I go, okay, do I need to draw out an example? Keeping the top a little bit smaller, the bottom a little bit bigger. This again is one of those where you're going to draw the spine first, and then you're going to look at it, decide how it looks in relationship to your letter before and how your spacing's been. And do I need to add a little bit of thickness on one side or the other? And that might be, no, I'm just going to put one whole line, or you might say, oh, I'm going to add a little bit of thickness up here and a little bit of thickness over here. You're just going to have to make a design decision depending on how that very first stroke went. And then like brick, we're going to come over, do the first part of the slab like that, coming over, we're connecting from here down, and then the second slab can go out. And I want you to think about those little curved slabs a little bit. I mean, again, you can make them as straight as you want, just like brick, but if you make them curved, I want you to kind of think of like barbed wire, right? So this will come in and then cover what we had going on down here. Then the other side will come out. And what we want here is for this to be even and this to be fairly even. That bottom part could stick out a bit. Your H is super simple, but you are going to make your stems thicker. Again, keeping in mind those serifs don't grow your letter too tall. And your crossbar is going to be thin, like we did on the E. The R, my favorite letter. We're going to start out with that thick stem. Now, we want a serif to be over here, and we have to think about the lobe or our counter space for our R. So I'm going to start with the serif kind of starting up a little bit, right? Because this is going to, it's going to look like the other serifs. It's going to come out. I'm going to go out pretty far, bring it in as far as I can, and then stop. This seems pretty far out here, which is okay because I can add another thick line. Notice I'm leaving this a little bit thin up there, just stylistically, and a little thin here. That's fine. I can bring this across to match it up. I'm imagining that line. This has got a lot of strokes in it. Imagining that line coming down to make that leg. I'm going to make that a double. Now here's where the fun begins. We're going to add the serif. I start with the one on the stem. That's going to determine my height, which is pretty much determined by my leg over here, since this goes down a little bit. Remember, the stem doesn't come on this left side. It's only on the right. So I'm going to have it come out there. And I have one more serif to add to the top. So again, you are seeing all of my overlaps. But what I love about this letter, especially this particular letter, is now if I were to go through and outline this, and I am pretty much following what I did here because I like all these little extra things coming off because they do look like frayed rope or barbed wire. I mean, if something seems a little thin, I can go on the outside. If it seems a little thick, I can go on the inside of what I drew there. And if I really want to show it's brushy, I might even make this a little jaggedy, like this. So it looks like it's torn. All right. 3 more letters. Who's in love with Wacky Western, or are you hating it?
I'm having trouble. Well, I do like it. I'm having a little trouble with it. I think I like it when it's outlined.
Yes, absolutely. You can clean it up then, right? You can really go back and clean it up. And give yourself a minute. This is the first time you've tried it, right?
Right. And
Okay.
some of my overlaps are not where the overlap should really be. So
Right. Yes. And you can always go back and watch this video.
right.
The
Oh,
letter,
yeah.
The letter D is like combining the letter R and the letter O. So you've got that stem. We're going to start our little serif before the stem. We're going to come way out. We're going to imagine we're following that circle like we did in Roman hand. Bring it back. Now I did that all in one stroke, and you can see I hesitated there. If you have to stop here, that's totally fine. Now I'm going to look at it and say, okay, is this wide enough? Should I go wider? No, I don't want to go any wider, but I might just taper, do a double stroke and then taper a little bit, because that's going to make it seem not, if I were to do this really thick up here, it would get a little narrow. Then I'll add my serifs. It's not very clean. There we go. So there's your D. Your L, we did the E, so again, very similar. Remember the bottom stroke, this, I kind of have fun with this. I just really make that a nice expressive line going across. Seems a little wide to me, so I'm going to bring my serifs in and overlap there. I'm constantly thinking about that, the proportion, especially with this lettering style, because it's so freestyle that it can really get away from you. And then the U, remember in clock face, we did the U sort of a thick and thin. So if you just write a U and then you look at it and go, oh, okay, I want this left side to be thick. Should I add it to the inside or the outside? And mine's pretty straight. Like I don't have any curves going out or anything. If I got too curvy going out, it would look more like a V. So it's really important that the bottom of your U is flat or rounded, because otherwise it could get confused with a V. Okay. So now I promised you some spurs, and then we'll quickly finish up, but hopefully by the end of the hour. So the spur is literally a diamond. So if you think about spurs on cowboy boots, and you don't have to add this, if you just like the lettering style the way it is, that's great. But you're going to make some diamonds by just holding your marker at a 45-degree angle and then pulling down and to the right. And if you decide I want all of my spurs to go right through the center, I wait until the very end to add them for two reasons. One, I want to make sure that I get them all the way across. If I draw them, then they might end up all over the place. But then I also want to say, you know what? I'm not going to put any on the inside. Ooh, do I even have room over here? If I put one here? Not really. And I don't want them to touch. So I put in my spurs. I'm a little judicious about where I put them. I try to make them all so that they're equal in the same line, like a midline or a waist. But then I also want to make sure that sometimes I don't put them everywhere. I just put them on the stems, or I put them on the outsides.
Heather,
All
where
right.
would you put one on an H? Or would
On
you
an
put one
H?
on an H?
Yeah, let me show you. We can go back to that. And if the diamonds, like again, you don't have to include them, or you can also get all black letter about it and do that kind of thing if you wanted to. So for the H, I would just put them right there, just on the outside right there. The big question is, where would you put them on the S? Oh, this is so hard. I'll probably have to look at my book again. This is honestly, I would just leave them off the S, because getting them right on the S is really awkward. So with the S, you actually make squares rather than diamonds, because you want it. Oh, that does not look good. That does not look good. Yeah, I would keep them off the S's, because there's so many times that I've tried to solve that problem and couldn't. With the N, because you've got so much happening over here, I would just put it on the outside. And what you want to do is you want to line up the tip of your nib to one, like at the top here, and then just bring the bottom of your nib down. That's how you get that on there so that it's a little triangle that sticks out. So when you go to outline it, this is where you can clean it up a little bit. And then say, oh, I'm going to go in there and fill that in just slightly. Oops, if I can get it right. Okay. All right, just a few more things before we go, because I want to make sure that you don't just leave in terms of, not having a next step. I'd love to know, what are you going to use these lettering styles for? So think of something that you can put into practice right away. And how would you dress up your Roman hand? So, or maybe you don't even want to take these 3. Maybe you'll do something different with it. How would you dress up your Roman hand? Feel free to unmute.
I just made myself my own yearly planner. So I think I'm going to do some of these. They may be a bit smaller for
Yes.
the months. For each month, I'm going to try a different one for each month, see how I get on.
Awesome. Love it. Good. Oops. Whoa. I don't know what that was. Anyone else? How do you plan to use this? Or maybe you're like, let me out of here. I don't know. Yeah, Sarah. Michelle.
You could try people's names.
Yes.
Yeah.
It looks
Name on
great
an
on
envelope.
envelopes are a great way to practice. I love it. Yes.
I
Good.
think it worked for Valentine's.
Yeah.
Crazy Valentine's.
Crazy Valentines. I love it. Good. Anyone else?
Sarah, we all expect a Valentine's card from you with this on there.
Oh,
Put
busted.
yourself on the spot right there.
Okay. So I also want to give a couple of other things. I have 2 classes I just want to tell you about that are ongoing or you have access to. One is called Make It Your Lettering Year. This is a year-long course with 52 weekly prompts, and we have monthly live calls. So if you want to get a sense of community, if you want to letter with folks, build your portfolio, or we also have 4 handmade book classes that are throughout the year. You might want to check out Make It Your Lettering Year. If you want to take any of my classes online, you can use the code Pacific Scribes, and I will put all of this in a follow-up email. And then there's a class that I offered a few years ago for the love of lettering with Sharon Zoigan, Mike Gold, and Carol Dubosh. And if you didn't have a chance to check that out, the recordings are still available. I think it's $90, but you'll get 25% off that. And it's just a wonderful class of the 3 of them. And because I love those 3 calligraphers so much, I came up with a contest this year called it's called For the Love of Pangrams. And I'm going to put this in the chat just so that you have it if you want to click that. It's if you go to bit.ly/pangram love and write your own original pangram, we're going to have a contest. Now we've got lots of people who have already signed up, but we'd love to have many, many more. And we're going to compile that list and make it public. So if you ever need to practice your lettering, pangrams are a great way to do that because it's a alphabet sentence that has all the letters in it. And Sharon, Mike, and Carol are the jurors for that. And we have some really great prizes. All right, just want to thank everyone. Keep in touch. Yes, time flew by, but hopefully you didn't miss too much of the game. And hopefully we'll meet up again on the internet. Anything else, Don? Oops, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'd like to say thank you very much. I think we all enjoyed it. We actually had only a few people drop off at the end. In fact, we had people come in instead of drop off. So that was good. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think there's lots of places we can use our lettering and stuff. So I think everyone probably learned one thing today. Even if it's just you have these pens at home, you can use them, right? Or you can at least try and play with them before they expire, Sarah. I think it's one of those things I have loads of these at home and forget. My kids left home a while ago and I forgot how to use them, right? So it's nice to actually know that you can just pick up one of these versus a bottle of ink and a pen every now and again. It would be nice. So thank you, Heather, for giving us the idea of at least giving it a go, or have a couple of little practice sheets now we can look at.
And if anything, maybe you learned a little bit more about Roman hand that you didn't know before, but I'd love to see you, if you can, just hold up your pieces if you have any, or if you want to hold them really close just to see one letter, I'd love to see that. Wonderful. Yay. I'm in gallery view. If you go to the upper right-hand corner and click to gallery view, you can see everybody. Oh, those are great. Play with different colors. Very nice, Ellie. Well done, Sylvia. Thank you. Good. Great to see a sneak peek of yours too, Sarah. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Sunday, and we'll get this video out to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate
Thank you very
that.
much.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you.
It was a great time together.
Heather, do you want to stay on for a second?
Yeah, happy to.